This is Strategic Mind: The Pacific, a World War II turn-based strategy game from Starny Games, the developers of Panzer Strategy. Today we're going to be looking at many of the features and mechanics of Strategic Mind. Welcome to the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Japanese are launching an invasion of Port Moresby, and as Admiral Chester Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, it's our job to stop them. This is Task Force 17, composed of the Yorktown carrier, a Colorado-class battleship, and a Clemson-class destroyer. The Colorado is the flagship of our fleet. Battleships are extremely powerful capital ships that have excellent attack, armor, and range. The Colorado has a 406mm main gun, a 127mm secondary gun, and a 20mm anti-aircraft gun, all of which can fire twice each turn when at full health. The Colorado is also where our Admiral's HQ is located, giving the ship unique skills that can be used with command points. Between missions or during deployment, you can relocate your HQ to any other core capital ship, including carriers. Our first mission is to join forces with Task Force 11, adding another carrier, 4 destroyers, and 2 submarines to our fleet. After destroying a Japanese scout plane and thus ensuring the enemy remains unaware of our presence, we must now locate the Japanese invasion force, moving to attack the island of Tulagi. There are 2 methods to do this. The first is to launch a float plane from our battleship. Excellent, we've located the invasion force. However, we still don't know the size and composition of the enemy fleet. Thus, let's use the second reconnaissance option, which is an HQ skill called Air Recon. The invasion force is escorted by only 3 destroyers. Our fleet should be able to easily handle this. Carriers are the most important ships in our fleet. They serve as a mobile airbase for our planes, allowing them to restock on ammo and fuel and repair light damage. Carriers also have the ability to attack and defend themselves using their 127mm dual-purpose guns and 20mm AA gun. Of course, the main weapon of our carriers are their aircraft, particularly their dive bombers and torpedo bombers. We'll make use of this powerful weapon to attack the enemy destroyers, but first, let's change up their equipment. This is the equipment screen. Our dive bombers currently have 2 choices of bombs they can equip. Armor-piercing bombs deal damage exclusively to a ship's hull, engine, and main gun, ignoring other ship parts. Incendiary bombs do the exact opposite, dealing double damage to all ship parts except for those 3. They also have the chance of starting a fire on the ship, causing further damage and preventing planes from landing or taking off from carriers. Let's acquire the incendiary bombs for our dive bombers, as dive bombers are able to select which part of the ship they wish to attack, and we're going to focus our fire on the enemy AA to ensure the destroyers can't retaliate against our bombers during their turn. You'll notice the Japanese destroyer is now on fire from our bombs. With our second dive bomber, let's try out the armor-piercing bombs. You can see that our incendiary bombs have done their job. The enemy anti-air has been disabled. So let's do an ordinary attack to damage the destroyer's hull and engine. Next, let's attack with one of our torpedo bombers. In addition to their regular attack that we just did, torpedo bombers also, unsurprisingly, have torpedoes they can use, which do damage exclusively to the hull. Your torpedo bomber will be vulnerable with reduced defense after dropping a torpedo. We'll upgrade our torpedoes to reduce these penalties. Torpedoes are best used against capital ships, as destroyers have very high torpedo defense. Since for this demonstration there aren't any capital ships to attack, we'll instead use our torpedo on a defenseless transport ship. We should also make use of our Wildcat fighters. While fighters are best used against enemy aircraft, they can also be used to attack enemy ships and troops, though are obviously less effective than bombers. An additional benefit of moving our fighters up is that they'll protect our bombers should they be attacked by enemy aircraft. So before ending our turn, let's take a look at the Japanese destroyer we've concentrated our attacks on, in order to discuss the concept of ship HP. Each ship has whole HP and total HP. Hull HP represents the strength or health of the ship. When hull HP is reduced to 0, the ship is destroyed. Each part on the ship also has HP, and the total HP is the sum of the current HP for all parts, including the hull. Once a part's HP is reduced to 0, it can no longer be used that turn. Therefore, this Japanese destroyer won't be able to use their AA guns until it is repaired. An engine with no HP will reduce the ship's movement points to 0. In addition, once the engine's HP is reduced to 50%, the ship's movement points will be halved. This is significant since the ship's maximum movement points are added to all their defense stats. All ship parts except the hull are repaired over time via maintenance. The hull will only be repaired in between operations. We've ended our turn and the enemy has taken theirs. The sun has set and this turn will take place at night. Besides the nice visual change, the dark of night does bring some penalties. All units will receive a 66% penalty to attack and their spotting range will be reduced by half. This has resulted in our fleet no longer being able to identify the enemy ships. Submarines make excellent scouts due to their ability to move multiple times until all of their movement points are expended. Getting our sub in the same hex as an enemy ship will fully identify it. We'll want to fully identify all the enemy ships as there is a penalty when attacking unidentified targets. Here's the destroyer we attacked last turn. You'll observe that it has repaired 1 HP to its AA guns, allowing it to attack our planes again. The combined attacks from our aircraft and ships will make short work of the Japanese invasion force. The island of Tulagi is safe from invasion, for now at least. Many of our planes are running low on fuel and ammunition, so let's have them resupply on either the airbase on Tulagi or one of our carriers. A carrier's flight deck also has HP, and if it's reduced to 0, then our planes will no longer be able to land on or take off from the carrier. Similar to how an aircraft must be located on an airbase or carrier to change its equipment, a ship must be in a hex next to a seaport in order to change its equipment. We'll move the Colorado next to the port in Tulagi to make some adjustments. The Colorado currently has a Marine squad equipped. Marines can be used to seize undefended infrastructure such as a seaport or maritime supply hub. They will return to their origin ship at the end of your turn. We could replace the Marine squad, but we have another equipment slot available. We'll equip 8 armor-piercing shells which function similar to the armor-piercing bombs of our dive bombers. We will again use our submarines to scout ahead. Well, what do you know? We've located a Japanese carrier. It's completely unaware of our presence and there are no escorts that we can see. We'll launch torpedoes from both of our submarines, which seem to have substantially reduced its hull strength. And each of those shell holes will reduce the carrier's movement points by 1 and also cause 1 more point of damage to the hull at the end of the turn. Our subs remain undetected and thus can't be attacked. But before we move the rest of our fleet, we should confirm the carrier doesn't have any friends nearby. We'll again use our float plane for reconnaissance. And it's a good thing that we did. The carrier is accompanied by at least 1 more carrier, 2 destroyers, 2 fighters, and 4 bombers. The Japanese fleet is far too dangerous when bunched up like this. We'll need to move into a position to ambush them once they spread out a bit. After ending our turn, the Japanese have sent most of their bombers to Tulagi to bomb the defenses. It didn't take long for them to find our battleship in port. The Colorado took a few hits, but nothing too bad. The carriers and their escorts are now moving towards Port Moresby, but with only 1 fighter for air support, they are extremely vulnerable and completely unaware that our fleet lies waiting for them ahead. We have our subs on their flanks letting them pass in order to approach the carriers from behind. The enemy bombers pose a serious danger to our fleet, thus we'll use the AA guns on our battleship, our destroyer, and one of our carriers, combined with fighter support to destroy as many of them as possible. We'll use the same tactic against the enemy fighter protecting the carrier fleet to open the way for our bombers. Our fighters have an ability called Afterburner that increases their movement points and defense at the cost of some fuel. Luckily, the enemy fighter is close enough and weak enough that using this ability won't be necessary. The Colorado will begin the attack on the already weakened Japanese carrier. The battleship's long range is outside the range of the carrier's smaller guns, hence it can't fire back. Now our submarines will move in from the rear of the carrier. With the escort destroyers too far ahead of it, they won't be able to defend the carrier with a support attack. Next, we'll send in the bombers. Unfortunately, we weren't able to sink the carrier this turn, but it's on its last legs. In our next turn, we finish shooting down the bombers attacking Tulagi, which will allow us to concentrate our forces on the Japanese carrier fleet. That carrier is barely still afloat. It's time to send the submarine to finish it off. It's a hit. The carrier is now sinking to the bottom of the sea. We'll retreat our sub to avoid a destroyer counterattack. Now to get that other carrier sunk. Once more, we'll use combined AA attack and fighters to rid the area of Japanese fighters. Let's move our sub in for a sneak attack on the second carrier's rear. It appears the submarine would take heavy losses in an attack due to the nearby destroyer. The sub will have to stand by while we take it out. We'll use our own destroyers to soak up the fire of the Japanese destroyer. They won't have any attacks left to fire back on our battleship. With the destroyer sunk, it's safe for our submarine to attack. Now we'll use the collective firepower of our ships and planes to destroy the second carrier. Two Japanese carriers sunk. This is already a significant victory for Allied forces. But the battle's not over yet. The remaining enemy destroyer does significant damage to a fighter and several of our own destroyers during their turn. It's now raining, drastically decreasing visibility in the battle zone. Rain reduces the attack of all units by 33%, but also makes units harder to see. Glaring through the mist of the rain, you'll find 3 of our destroyers smoking from the damage they've received. One destroyer's engine is terribly damaged, partially reducing its movement points and defense. Luckily, there's something we can do about this. Once per operation, a ship can do an emergency repair to instantly restore some HP to a ship part, or it can be used to put out one fire, or remove a shell hole. We'll do the emergency repair on the destroyer's engine, restoring it to full HP. This destroyer has caused us enough issues. It's far past time that we make use of our armor-piercing shells to focus the Colorado's firepower on the Japanese ship's vital components. Shortly after, one of our submarines locates the Japanese invasion force, which is escorted by a third carrier and more destroyers. We torpedo the carrier and then retreat. Our planes are all in need of ammo and fuel. This day of poor weather would be a good time to send all our aircraft back to their carriers. You'll notice that some of the minor damage is repaired when the aircraft lands, restoring some of its HP. We'll also regroup our Navy in preparation to repel the enemy invasion force. Despite the cover provided by the rain, the enemy locates and almost destroys one of our submarines. The rain dissipates into a beautifully clear night sky as we receive air reinforcements from our allies. Our first action of the turn will be an emergency repair on our submarine's engine, as it's completely disabled, leaving the sub dead in the water. Back on the move, the sub will retreat as far as it can get, but not before launching a torpedo at a transport ship it stumbled upon. You may have noticed a flashing star on our battleship. That means it has gotten enough experience to level up. Each time a ship levels up, you'll select one new skill. Which skill you select will depend on how you plan on using the ship and your own playstyle. We're going to select the Overpower skill. Each of our attacks now will reduce an enemy unit's attack and defense values by 1. This can stack up to a -4 to each value. Our float plane has identified another Japanese capital ship, a Mogami heavy cruiser. This poses a serious threat to our navy in the area, thus has to be taken out. We launch attacks on the cruiser with our bombers and the Colorado, while our destroyers focus their attack on the Japanese transport ships. This is easy experience for our destroyers, allowing one of them to level up. Each unit type has its own unique selection of skills. We'll give our destroyer the evasive maneuvering skill, which will grant an additional 25% of maximum move points to its defenses. Unfortunately, the enemy sinks one of our core destroyers during their turn. Unlike auxiliary units, core units are brought from one operation to the next, so it's quite a blow to our forces. You can tell the difference between core units and auxiliary ones by the color of its hull strength. Yellow indicates an auxiliary unit, while your core units are green. In the top left corner of the screen, you'll find the Victory Progress bar, which displays how well you're doing in the operation. By clicking on it, we can see how many victory points and how much prestige we've earned from killing enemies and achieving objectives, as well as our total kills and losses sorted by unit type. You'll also notice our type of victory we're set to achieve at the moment. In our case, we'd get a silver victory. In our next turn, we will use the last of the Colorado's armor-piercing rounds on the Japanese heavy cruiser. It wasn't quite enough to sink it, but the Mogami will be a non-factor for the rest of this battle. Our destroyers and carriers continue focusing on sinking the enemy transport ships. With the last transport ship sunk, the Japanese offensive has been repelled. We've achieved the silver victory and can end the operation, though we also have the option to continue the operation in order to rack up more prestige, and we'll do exactly that, using our remaining bombers and ships to attack the heavy cruiser and the final carrier. We finally sink the Mogami, but the carrier, while badly damaged, remains afloat. It's time to end this battle. Allowing the enemy its turn would only result in further losses. With victory achieved, we make our way to the strategic room in order to prepare for the next operation. Welcome to the strategic room. Selecting our admiral will give us the opportunity to spend victory points to get new skills for our HQ. We'll purchase the skill that lets us call in airstrikes onto the battlefield. Clicking on the units board on the wall will take us to where we interact with our core units. All actions in here will cost prestige. Let's upgrade our Clemson class destroyer to a Fletcher class, increasing its stats. We'll also upgrade all of our aircraft to newer models. If any units can level up, we can do that from here as well. In addition, we can change, remove, or add new equipment to any of our units. And I think we'll move our HQ from the Colorado to the Yorktown carrier, which can be done here or during deployment. Let's use the rest of our prestige to purchase some new units. Right now we can only select air and naval units, but land units will unlock after the second operation. The Colorado was instrumental in our victory in the Coral Sea, so I'd like to buy another capital ship. Unfortunately, we can't afford another battleship, so we'll acquire a Northampton class heavy cruiser instead. The heavy cruiser has less HP and lower attack and naval defense, but features a higher air and torpedo defense and more movement points. We'll also purchase a new fighter to help us clear the skies of Japanese aircraft. With our prestige and victory points spent, we'd click on the campaign map in order to progress to the next operation. But regrettably, this is the conclusion of the video. We hope you found it helpful in your endeavors to master the complex and deep mechanics of strategic mind in the Pacific. Thank you, and good luck, Admirals.
Like and share if you enjoyed the video and think others might benefit from this, and of course subscribe and hit the notification button if you are new to the channel and want to be notified every time I post a video.